Picture Monday morning. You open your calendar, back to back, no gaps, first meeting in 11 minutes. Before you can think about it, something in your chest tightens. Not anxiety, exactly. Something older. Your body reacts before your brain catches up. Here's the thing nobody thinks to ask. That tightening wasn't always there. Not because life was easier. Because for roughly 300,000 years, the human brain was never asked to run a schedule like this. Not once. Modern workers log somewhere around 90,000 hours over a career. That's 1/3 of every waking hour, every day, for most of your adult life, handed over to an employer or a client or a deadline. It's the dominant fact of human existence right now. And yet, for 99% of our species' time on Earth, that arrangement didn't exist. No wages, no job titles, no 40-hour week. So what did people actually do? The honest answer is more complicated than you've probably heard and more interesting. Let's start with the number that stops most people cold. In 1966, anthropologist Richard Lee tracked the daily activity of the Hoanzi people in what is now Botswana, a community still living by hunting and gathering. His finding, adults spent roughly 17 hours per week acquiring food, not per day, per week, about 2.5 days out of 7. Anthropologists went looking to see if this was a fluke. The Hadza in Tanzania, the Aceh in Paraguay, the Matu in Australia. Different continents, different climates, entirely different ecosystems. Same result, between 15 and 20 hours per week on survival. You probably spend twice that at your desk, and most of what you're doing keeps nobody alive. The skeleton record backs this up. When archaeologists compare pre-agricultural bones to the first farmers, the contrast is jarring. The farmers were shorter, their spines showed arthritis from repetitive bending, and their teeth rotted from grain-heavy diets. The hunter-gatherers before them? Taller, denser bones, less joint damage. Their bodies tell a story of varied physical work, not the same motion, ground down, day after day. So the hours existed. The question is, what filled them? Part of the answer is the kind of work that doesn't feel like work. Spending a morning napping a flint blade or weaving a carrying basket took real skill, real concentration, and no supervisor. The finished object mattered. Making it well meant something, because in a world without money, competence was the currency. The best toolmaker, the best tracker, the best storyteller. These people had weight in the group, not through rank exactly, more like gravity. Others came toward them. This is worth holding on to, because hunter-gatherer life wasn't the flat, stressless existence it sometimes gets described as. There was competition, there was status. Some people wanted to rise, and others tried to stop them. The Hadza and the Hoanzi are known for a practice called leveling. If a hunter brings in a big kill and starts acting proud about it, the group cuts him down. Jokes, teasing, pointed indifference. The meat gets shared and the ego gets deflated. A real deliberate mechanism for keeping any one person from accumulating too much power. The hierarchy existed. It was just actively suppressed by everyone around it. And then there was the other part of the day, the part that a visitor from modern life consistently finds the most disorienting. A researcher who spent weeks living with an isolated tribe in South America described watching the adults sit for hours, faces turned toward the horizon, doing nothing that he could name. Not resting, not talking, not working, just looking. He said it made him anxious. He kept waiting for something to happen. Nothing happened. They sat there like they were listening to something he couldn't hear. Neuroscientists now have a name for what the brain is doing in those moments. Default mode. When you're not focused on an external task, a specific network lights up the same one active during daydreaming, creative problem solving, and processing complicated emotions. Marcus Reichel at Washington University called it the brain at rest. But rest is the wrong word. It's more like integration. The mind sorts, connects, and makes meaning during these apparent pauses. The people staring at the horizon weren't wasting time. They were doing something their brains were built for. Something we've largely engineered out of our days. But here's where it gets interesting. When the sun went down, the day didn't end. It changed. For most of human existence, fire was the only light after dark. Anthropologist Polly Weissner, who spent 4 decades studying the Jew Hoanzi, noticed something striking when she analysed 174 recorded conversations from day and night. During the day, people talked about practical things: who had seen animal tracks whether someone had failed to share a fair portion, logistics of the coming days, useful talk, necessary talk. At night, around the fire, something shifted. More than 80% of the conversation moved to stories: ancestors who did impossible things, spirits that inhabited distant places. Old conflicts were resolved and retold until they became legend, jokes that brought the whole group to laughter. Weissner wrote that stories and gifs were, for these people, the original social media, the way information about people, places, and possibilities travelled across networks far wider than any single camp. Here's what this actually means. Those stories weren't entertainment in the way we use the word. They were the operating system. Myths encoded who you were, where you belonged, what obligations you carried. Jokes maintained the social fabric: who was in good standing, who owed whom, where the tensions were running hot. The firelit night was where culture was transmitted. Every single night, for hundreds of thousands of years, before anyone built a wall and called it indoors. Weissner asked what happens when artificial light turns that story time into work time. She didn't answer it, but you might already know. Somewhere around the 4th hour of a screen-lit evening, sleep too was different, and in ways that matter more than most people realise. A 2017 study by David Sampson at the University of Toronto tracked 33 Hadza adults using wristband sensors over 393 days. They slept an average of 6.25 hours per night. But here's the part that should rearrange something in your thinking. Across all those nights, there were only 18 total minutes when every single member of the group was asleep at the same time. 18 minutes out of thousands of hours of observation. This wasn't insomnia. This was the sentinel effect, a pattern in group-living animals where biological variation in sleep timing means someone is almost always awake, alert to whatever moves in the dark. Not assigned, not scheduled, just built into the variation of human sleep across age and sex, so the group was never fully exposed at once. Your body still runs that program. When you wake at 2 a.m., for no reason you can name, you aren't malfunctioning. You're one of the night sentinels. You were never asked, but you were selected for it over a very long time. Now, before you draft a letter of resignation, there's something this picture tends to leave out. Around half of all children born in hunter-gatherer communities didn't survive to age 15. That's not a number designed to fit a comforting narrative. It's what the data says, across multiple studies of modern foragers and archaeological populations. A wound modern antibiotics would clear in days could kill you in a week. A difficult birth had no intervention. A respiratory illness in a bad winter could take an entire section of a camp. And violence was real. Near Lake Turkana in Kenya, archaeologists found the remains of 27 people from roughly 10,000 years ago, left in a dry lagoon bed without burial. 20 showed signs of violent death, skull fractures, broken hands, and obsidian embedded in bone. Cambridge researchers concluded this wasn't a chance encounter. The attackers brought multiple weapon types. They planned it. Intergroup raids and territorial violence were part of the world too. So the picture is not a paradise. If you made it through childhood, your modal age of death was around 72, comparable to modern life expectancy in many parts of the world, without a hospital in sight. But getting there required surviving a gauntlet that killed half the people who tried. That gauntlet was not a small thing. What the hunter-gatherer life offered was not safety. It offered a particular kind of coherence between the body's rhythms and the day's demands, between the brain's needs and the life it was living. Agriculture changed all of that, not as a choice made by individuals weighing options, but as a slow lock-in. Plant crops, feed more people. More people need more crops. Within a few generations, populations that started farming couldn't stop too many mouths for the old way. And farming required far more labour. Planting, weeding, harvesting, storing, and defending against anyone who wanted what you'd grown. The skeletons of early farmers show the cost. More arthritis, shorter stature, more nutritional deficiency. They worked harder and died younger than the people before them. But they survived in numbers the old life couldn't support. Division of labour followed. Specialists, scribes, soldiers, administrators. Eventually, someone had the idea of paying someone else to do work they didn't want to do. And from that came everything you call an economy. You are living at the end of a very long chain of consequences that started when someone in the Fertile Crescent pushed a seed into the ground and waited. Your brain was not upgraded along the way. It still runs the same hardware as 300,000 years ago. It wants to move varied distances, not sit. It wants to make things with its hands. It wants social time that isn't transactional, file-it conversation that goes nowhere useful, and long, unscheduled stretches to look at the middle distance and quietly integrate everything it has learned. Every time you feel the pull toward doing nothing, real nothing, not productive leisure, not optimized recovery, but actual vacant staring that is not a character flaw. That is a very old system, signaling that it needs what it was built for. The question isn't whether we can go back. We can't. And most of us wouldn't. Not the infant mortality, not the raids, not the wound that kills before antibiotics arrive. The question is whether we understand what we traded and what it costs us, that we no longer have a name for what we're missing. Your ancestors had that name. They said it every night, in the dark, around a fire. We just haven't been able to sit still long enough to hear it.